Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today I want to present AGR 113 video presentation. My group member is Muhammad Fitri Izani bin Abdul Hafiz and his matric number is 2022893742. And my name is Muhammad Azrul Adam bin Muhammad Azhari and my matrix number is 2022696126. Our lecturer name is Madam Nurshilawati binti Abdul Aziz. Today I want to tell you about what is protectionism. Protect, Protectionism refers to government policies that restrict international trade to help domestic industries. Protectionist policies are usually implemented with the goal to improve economic activity within a domestic economy, but can also be implemented for safety for quality concerns. Government level tariffs are the chief protectionist measure. They raise the price of import articles, making them more expensive and therefore less attractive than domestic products. Protective tariffs have historically been employed to stimulate industries in countries beset by recession and depression. Protectionism may be helpful to emerging industries in developing nations. It can also serve as a means of fostering self-sufficiency in defense industries. Throughout history, wars and economic depression or recessions have led to increase in protectionism, while peace and prosperity have tended to encourage free trade. The European monarchies favored protectionist policies in the 7th and 18th centuries in an attempt to increase trade and build their domestic economies at the expense of other nations. These policies, now discredited, became known as mercantilism. Great Britain began to abandon its protective tariffs in the first half of the 9th century after had achieved industrial preeminence in Europe. What is reason for protectionism? First, national defense. The national security argument is a justification provided for adopting protectionist policies such as tariffs, quotas, and other barriers by stating that it is unwise to become dependent on imports of certain products because it makes the nation vulnerable. National interest argument for protectionism mentioned to restricting imports is neither a wise decision nor solve problems. National interest argument with respect to certain products state that for products like different equipment, oil, technology, a country must not be too dependent on other countries. It would be vulnerable to importing certain key products because if the nation becomes dependent of those key import products, then it would be difficult to cut off. A stockpile of reserves would be the wiser decision to use the foreign supplies when available, compared to preemptively restricting imports. Better to not depend on them. Second, balance of payments. Many people assume the best way to address a current account deficit or trade deficit is to erect trade barriers, and that is certainly one way to do it. However, other backdoor methods to improve a country's balance of trade can also be used. For example, a country could choose to implement policies that increase the national savings rate or make decisions which force capital flows to reverse. A country a country could also choose to the to devalue its currency to improve the current account deficit. When US uh, policymakers accused China of currency manipulation several years ago. For example, it was because China has been buying US treasuries, which create a capital account deficit and a corresponding trade surplus for China, while at the same time creating a capital account surplus and corresponding trade deficit for the United States. It also creates balance of payment disequilibrium as demand for imports is dampened and exports promoted. This made the domestic output appear to be more competitive.
Uh, Next, I will be the next present. Number three, infant industry. An infant industry is a term used in economics to describe an industry that is in its early stage of development. In other words, an infant industry is a newly established industry. Therefore, infant industry lack the experience and size to compete effectively against established competitors abroad. An infant industry is characterized by a lack of efficiency, competitiveness, and a high vulnerability to sudden market change. Consider a country that traditionally imports cars from overseas and has no domestic production of cars. The creation of a domestic automotive industry would be an example of an infant industry. Infant industry protectionism may encourage industry to be inefficient. Developing industry that have protection may lack the incentive to be efficient and competitive. Infant industry protectionism may result in retaliation from other countries. Once an industry gains government protection, it may be politically difficult to remove the protective measure later on due to vested interests. It is difficult for a government to choose industry to industry protectionism decrease consumer surplus as is it results in consumer having to pay higher prices for goods that would have otherwise been cheaper if imported. Next, level playing field. The realm of political discourse. Metaphors are powerful. A well-written metaphor paints a mental picture and in doing so, transform how we view the situation. Particularly powerful metaphors have the potential to redefine ethical consideration and replace proof with persuasion. The problem occurs when the metaphor is non-analogous to the situation it describes. Then it becomes detrimental to pursuit of truth. One of the most misleading metaphors in use today is the level playing field analogy. Such a phrase clearly originates from sport, where each team and player has to abide by the rule clearly. No one would support a team that won by cheating. The term was first used figuratively in 1977 by John Bolger, a lobbyist for the U.S. Banker Association. Since then, it has been extended to numerous political contexts to demand law that enforce fairness. Trade policy has not been spared from its frequent usage. The use of the phrase level playing field is overused among politicians and pundits. Needless to say, it is one of the most compelling and damning pieces of rhetoric employed by proponents of protectionism against free trade and it was debunked by Frederick Bastiat more than 150 years ago. And lastly is the effect as of protectionism. The main effect of protectionism is a decline in trade, higher price from some goods, and a form of subsidy for protect industry. Some jobs in this industry may be saved, but jobs in other industries are likely to be a loss. Protectionism occurs when countries place restriction on import into the economy. This can involve higher tariff, a type of tax on import, of quotas and embargoes. Other forms of protectionism can be less obvious, such as domestic subsidy to give industry unfair advantage. The main effect of protectionism is a decline in trade, higher price for some goods, and a form of subsidy for protect industry. Some jobs in this industry may be saved, but jobs in other industries are likely to be a loss. Conclusion. The preceding chapter identified some important influences of per capita import level, and they provide some indication of the extent of protectionist practice in various countries. All the analyses were comparative ones since the measures used were derived were derived relative to other states. Per capita import for the individual countries were above or below predicted level when compared to the other similar nations in the dataset. While all the industrial countries were undoubtedly more open in 1994 than in 1960, since there had been extensive global liberalization and world trade had expanded significantly. Some some countries were clearly still more open than others. If pro- if protection had provided advantage, and there is at least the possibility that a country can benefit from imposing protection, especially if no one else utilize protectionist practice, then the comparative openness of country in terms of national import pattern continue to be important. The knowledge of the relative openness of market will be relevant to understand to the trade and economic policy as well as the international economic activities of various countries. The analysis and the result that they generate indicated this that this comparative approach to the idea of revealed openness of protection was indeed useful, and the import level for different states were put into an appropriate perspective as a consequence. Comparison over time also provide insight into change that were taking place in individual country, change among the country, and change in different product categories. Thank you from our